Widow knocks on the Devil Duke's door at midnight. Hide my son for one night. The gambling den doors burst open at midnight, thunder rolling through London's darkness as rain-soaked Clara Hartwell stumbled inside, dragging her 8-year-old son Leo by the hand. The boy clutched a wooden toy soldier like it was the only solid thing left in the world. Inside, smoke curled through lamplight, coins clinked across green bays, and men who should have been home with their families gambled away futures they'd never miss. At the center table sat Julian Thorne, Duke of Alaric, winning without joy, his cold eyes barely registering victory as another man folded with a curse. They called him the Devil Duke, not for cruelty but for certainty. He didn't bluff. He simply decided your fate and watched it happen. Clara locked eyes with him across the smoky room and delivered not a plea for mercy but an order born from desperate love. They're 2 minutes behind me. Hide my son. Just for tonight. Hello, lovely. If you're enjoying this tale of midnight choices, unlikely protection, and discovering that monsters sometimes have the most human hearts, I'd be so grateful for a like or subscribe. It helps me bring you more stories of courage, unexpected alliances, and love that's earned through action rather than promised through words. And if you're up for it, tell me in the comments, would you knock on a stranger's door at midnight to save someone you love? I read every note and it always brings a smile to my face. 1. The gambling den belonged to Duke Julian Thorne in everything but name. Officially, it was managed by Lord Rothwell, a charming wastrel whose family connections protected the establishment from legal scrutiny. Unofficially, everyone knew the Devil Duke owned it, profited from it, and occasionally graced it with his presence when Parliament bored him and solitude became unbearable. Tonight, Julian sat at the corner table with 4 other men, none of whom he particularly liked but all of whom amused him with their predictable desperation. Lord Ashford was losing badly, his carefully maintained facade cracking with each failed hand. Mr. Grantham kept drinking to steady his nerves, which only made his betting worse. Captain Wells played with military precision but lacked imagination. And Rothwell himself bet recklessly because money meant nothing when you'd never actually earned it. Julian won consistently, not through cheating but through observation. He read tells others didn't notice. The slight tremor in Ashford's hand when he bluffed. The way Grantham's breathing changed with good cards. Wells's military discipline that made him predictable. Rothwell's performative confidence that masked genuine fear. It was boring. Profitable but boring. Julian had spent 10 years building a reputation as the Devil Duke, the man you didn't cross, the aristocrat who played by different rules, and he discovered that being feared was deeply, profoundly lonely. Then the doors crashed open. Every head turned. The gambling den had rules. No women. No disruptions. No entry after midnight without prior arrangement. Yet here was a woman in a soaked traveling cloak, her dark hair plastered to her face, dragging a small boy who looked terrified and defiant in equal measure. She scanned the room with desperate intensity until her eyes found Julian. Then she moved toward him with the determination of someone who had one chance and knew it. Your Grace. Her voice was steady despite visible trembling. They're 2 minutes behind me. Hide my son. Just for tonight. The room went silent. Julian studied her with the same attention he gave to cards. Young widow, maybe 30. Not from his usual circles but educated by her speech. The boy was 8 or 9, clinging to her hand with one fist and gripping a wooden toy soldier with the other. Rothwell recovered first, his charming smile sliding into place. My dear woman, this is hardly the place for children. Perhaps you've mistaken. I haven't mistaken anything. She cut him off without looking away from Julian. You're the Duke of Alaric. They say you're the devil himself. They say you never lose. They say men fear you because you don't bluff, you just decide. They say many things, Julian replied, his voice calm. What makes you think any of it's true? Because I need someone who can decide. Fast. Final. Without hesitation. Her hand tightened on the boy's shoulder. My husband's uncle is coming for my son. He has officers he's bribed. Papers he's forged. And 2 minutes until he arrives to take Leo somewhere I'll never find him. Why would he do that? Julian asked, though he was already standing, already calculating. Because my husband left something that makes Leo valuable. And while Leo lives free, his uncle can't touch it. Captain Wells laughed nervously. Alaric, surely you're not considering. All of you. Out. Julian's voice carried absolute authority. The den is closed for tonight. You can't be serious, Ashford protested. We're in the middle of a hand. And I'm ending it. You're up £300, Ashford. Consider it mercy. Leave. Now. When they hesitated, Julian removed his heavy cloak and dropped it over the boy's shoulders, enveloping him completely. He stays. The rest of you don't. Choose quickly because she's right about the timing. The other men scrambled to collect their winnings and depart. Only Rothwell paused at the door. Julian, if this becomes scandal. It's already scandal, Rothwell. I'm simply deciding which kind. Julian moved to the window, watching the street. 2 minutes, she said. Let's see if she's accurate. Clara stood frozen, watching this cold duke wrap her son in protection without asking questions, without demanding explanations, without any of the hesitation she'd expected. Why are you helping us? She whispered. I haven't decided yet. Julian's attention remained on the window. But I dislike people who use children as leverage. It offends my sense of order. 1 minute later, carriages appeared. 2 of them. Expensive, official-looking. Men emerged, and Julian recognized the type immediately. Sir Basil Harrowby, late 50s, expensively dressed, carrying himself with the confidence of someone used to buying cooperation. Behind him, a slick man in clerk's clothing, Mr. Crick probably, the kind who did dirty work for proper compensation. And 2 officers, nervous but committed, clearly paid to look official while acting criminal. He brought witnesses, Julian observed. Professional. He always is. Clara's voice was tight with fear. He'll claim concern for Leo's welfare. Say I'm unstable. That the boy needs proper guardianship. And you think I can stop him? I think you can make him hesitate long enough for me to find another way. Julian turned from the window, studying her with new interest. You're not asking me to save you permanently. Just buy you time. I'm asking you to hide my son for 1 night. After that, I'll handle it myself. The honesty of it struck Julian unexpectedly. This wasn't melodrama or performance. This was a practical woman with an impossible problem asking for minimum necessary help. Heavy footsteps sounded on the stairs. Julian made a decision. Under the table. Both of you. Complete silence. He waited until Clara and Leo were hidden beneath the green baize cloth. Then he poured himself brandy, settled into his chair, and arranged cards as though he'd been playing alone all evening. The door opened without knock. Sir Basil entered with his entourage, his expression professionally concerned. Your Grace, I apologize for the intrusion. I'm searching for my nephew and his mother. They left their lodgings without notice, and given the child's age and his mother's condition, I'm naturally worried. Julian took a slow sip of brandy. Your family troubles aren't my concern, Harrowby. Of course not, Your Grace. However, witnesses placed them entering this establishment approximately 5 minutes ago. If they're here, I simply wish to ensure the boy's safety. This establishment closed 5 minutes ago. As you can see, I'm alone. Mr. Crick stepped forward, his voice oily with false deference. Your Grace, perhaps you weren't aware of their entrance. We could conduct a brief search. You could leave. Julian's voice dropped to the tone that had earned him his reputation. Immediately. Before I decide you've insulted me by suggesting I'm lying. The 2 officers exchanged nervous glances. They were paid, but not enough to cross a duke directly. Sir Basil tried a different approach, his smile remaining fixed. Your Grace, I understand your position. But the law is clear. As the boy's guardian. Are you? The law requires documentation. Proper guardianship papers filed with appropriate courts. Do you have them? They're being prepared as we speak. Then they don't exist yet. Which means you have no legal standing to demand anything. Julian stood, using his height and position deliberately. I'll say this once more, clearly. This establishment is closed. No one is here but me. You're welcome to verify that by speaking with Lord Rothwell, who manages this property, or by filing complaints with the appropriate authorities tomorrow during business hours. But you will not search these premises. You will not make demands. You will leave. Now. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't threaten violence. Simply stated consequences with absolute certainty. Sir Basil's professional concern cracked slightly, showing the calculation beneath. Very well, Your Grace. But understand, by dawn that child will be properly placed. With or without cooperation. After they left, Julian waited 5 full minutes before speaking. They're gone. You can emerge. Clara crawled out first, then helped Leo from under the table. The boy looked up at Julian with wide eyes. Are you really the devil? Tonight, I'm your monster, Julian replied with unexpected gentleness. Which means nothing can hurt you. He moved to the window, watching Basil's carriages retreat. They'll be back. Maybe not here, but somewhere. You have perhaps 6 hours before he files emergency custody papers. If he's as professional as he appears, he'll have magistrate support by morning. I know. Clara was already gathering Leo close. We'll leave London. Tonight. I have some money saved. You'll come with me. Julian turned from the window. To my townhouse. Where we'll examine exactly what your husband left that's worth stealing children for. Your Grace, I can't. The scandal alone is already started the moment I cleared this room for you. We're past propriety, Mrs. Hartwell. Now we're in damage control. Julian pulled on his coat. Besides, my house has better locks. And I'm curious about what's worth all this trouble. Clara wanted to refuse. Wanted to maintain her independence. But Leo was exhausted and terrified, and she had nowhere else safe to go. One night, she agreed. Just until I can arrange something better. One night, Julian confirmed. Though I suspect that's optimistic. His carriage waited outside, expensive and anonymous in equal measure. As they climbed in, Leo still clutching his toy soldier, Clara realized she'd traded one danger for another. The man they called the Devil Duke was taking them somewhere far more dangerous than any gambling den. She was going to his home. And nothing about Julian Thorne suggested he was the kind of man who let people leave easily once they were under his protection. 2. Julian's townhouse in Mayfair was exactly what Clara expected from the Devil Duke and nothing like what she'd feared. It was quiet, severe, immaculate, the home of a man who didn't allow mess because mess led to feeling things he'd rather not feel. The butler, Greaves, was elderly and unflappable. He took one look at Clara's soaked cloak and Leo's terrified face and simply nodded. I'll prepare rooms, Your Grace. And perhaps refreshments. Tea. Food for the boy. Something simple. Julian hesitated. Do we have biscuits? Pastries, Your Grace. Mrs. Holloway keeps them for occasions. What occasions? We never have guests. Perhaps that's why we have so many pastries, Your Grace. After Greaves departed with dry humor intact, Julian led Clara and Leo to a sitting room that managed to be both elegant and oddly comfortless. Beautiful furniture arranged with precision but no personality. Art on walls that looked expensive but unloved. Leo took it all in with the brutal honesty of childhood. Are you the monster? The question stopped Julian mid-motion. He turned to face the boy seriously. I've been called that. Why do you ask? Mama said we needed someone who wouldn't be afraid. Someone who could decide things. That sounds like a monster. Julian knelt to Leo's level, his expression unreadable. For tonight, I am your monster. Which means nothing can hurt you. Does that sound acceptable? Leo considered this with the gravity of someone who'd learned early that adults didn't always protect you. Can I keep my soldier? Of course. Every good monster needs an army. The small exchange seemed to satisfy Leo. He clutched his wooden soldier and settled onto the sofa with the exhaustion of crisis deferred rather than resolved. Clara watched this interaction with something between gratitude and confusion. The Devil Duke everyone whispered about, the man who ruined businesses and ended careers without hesitation, had just made a solemn promise to an 8-year-old boy. Greaves returned with tea service and an array of pastries that suggested Mrs. Holloway had anticipated exactly this kind of late-night emergency. Leo tried one cautiously, then delivered his verdict with surprising authority. If monsters serve this, I may become one. Julian's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but something that suggested the muscles remembered how. Mrs. Holloway will be pleased. After Leo was settled with food, Julian turned his attention to Clara. Now, explain. Start with your husband. Clara took a breath, organizing thoughts she'd been too panicked to fully process. Thomas Hartwell. We married 4 years ago. He was a clerk, managing accounts for Sir Basil's charitable foundation. Respectable work. Honest work. Or so I thought. You didn't know about problems? Not until 3 months before he died. Thomas became frightened. Secretive. He started bringing work home, reviewing papers until dawn. When I asked what was wrong, he said he'd found discrepancies. That Basil was stealing from orphan relief funds. That if anyone discovered it, there would be consequences. Julian leaned forward slightly. What kind of discrepancies? Money meant for housing placements, food, clothing, all diverted. Thomas said it was thousands of pounds over years. He compiled evidence, created a ledger proving it. He planned to expose it properly, through legal channels. But he didn't. Clara's voice broke slightly. He died before he could. Carriage accident. Very sudden. Very convenient for Sir Basil. You think it was murder. I think Thomas was terrified the week before he died. I think he gave me a sealed packet and told me to hide it somewhere safe. I think 3 days after his funeral, Sir Basil suddenly became very interested in Leo's welfare. Clara pulled a worn envelope from inside her cloak. This is what Thomas left. I haven't opened it fully. Just enough to see it's a ledger with names, dates, amounts. Julian took the envelope carefully, examining the seal. You realize this makes you dangerous to Basil. And Leo even more so. Why Leo more than me? Because you're an adult who can testify. Leo's a child who can be controlled, hidden, or eliminated through legal means disguised as concern. Institutionalization. Apprenticeship to someone conveniently far away. Boarding school in another country. Any of these remove him from your protection permanently while looking respectable. The brutal practicality of it made Clara feel sick. Then what do I do? We examine this ledger. We determine exactly what leverage it provides. And we use it before Basil uses you. Julian stood, moving to a locked cabinet and removing paper and ink. But first, you should know something about your late husband. What? Julian's expression was complicated. 3 years ago, there was a fire at a factory I invested in secretly. Workers' housing, actually, though I kept my involvement quiet to avoid the usual aristocratic nonsense about charity. The fire spread fast. People were trapped. I was there meeting with managers when it happened. Clara watched him, seeing genuine emotion break through the cold facade. Your husband was there too, visiting his sister who worked in the building. He could have run. Most did. Instead, he dragged me out of a collapsing section that would have killed me. Refused to leave until he'd helped others. Saved probably a dozen lives that night, including mine. Thomas never mentioned that. He wouldn't have. That's who he was. Julian's voice was rough. I tried to repay him. Offered money, position, connections. He refused everything except a promise. What promise? That if he ever needed help, truly needed it, I would provide it without question. Julian met her eyes. I never got the chance. He died before calling that debt due. So now I'm extending it to you and Leo. Not charity. Payment of obligation to a man who saved my life. Clara felt tears threaten. He would have liked that. Thomas always believed in honoring debts. A sharp knock at the door interrupted them. Greaves entered looking uncharacteristically concerned. Your Grace, there's a messenger boy at the servants' entrance. He insists it's urgent. From Sir Basil Harrowby. Julian and Clara exchanged looks. Send him in. The boy was perhaps 12, nervous but determined to deliver his message properly. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace, sir. Sir Basil says to tell you formal like that he's filed emergency custody papers. Magistrate will hear the case at 8 o'clock this morning. Says if the lady and boy aren't present, he'll have warrants issued." "Thank you." Julian handed the boy a coin far more generous than necessary. "Tell Sir Basil the message was received." After the boy left, Clara whispered, "He's faster than I thought." "Then we stop reacting," Julian said with sudden determination, "and start hunting." He moved to his desk, pulling papers and beginning to write with focused intensity. "Greaves, send for my solicitor. Mr. Fenwick. Tell him it's urgent and involves challenging custody fraud. He'll come. At 2 in the morning, Your Grace. He owes me several favors. Use them." Julian continued writing without looking up. "Mrs. Hartwell, I need you to remember everything. Every detail Thomas mentioned. Every name in that ledger. Every discrepancy he found. We have 6 hours to build a case that protects Leo permanently." Clara moved to the desk, her fear transforming into focus. "Then let's get started." As they worked through the night, Leo fell asleep on the sofa, still clutching his wooden soldier, wrapped in Julian's cloak that swamped him completely. Every so often, Julian would glance at the boy, his expression unreadable but no longer quite so cold. The Devil Duke, Clara realized, was beginning to remember what it felt like to protect something that mattered. 3. Dawn arrived with the kind of grey London light that made everything look slightly more hopeless. Clara had been awake for 24 hours, sustained by tea and fear in equal measure. Julian had worked through the night without visible exhaustion, his focus absolute as he, Clara, and his solicitor Mr. Fenwick had examined Thomas's ledger. What they found was worse than Clara had expected. Sir Basil Harrowby had stolen over £15,000 from orphan relief funds over 5 years. But the ledger revealed something more insidious. He'd funneled the money through carefully constructed false charities, using names of people who either didn't exist or were conveniently dead. Mr. Crick, his clerk, had managed the paperwork with professional precision. "This is damning evidence," Mr. Fenwick said, adjusting his spectacles. The solicitor was in his 50s, precise and unflappable in the way men became when they'd spent decades navigating aristocratic scandals. "But it's also dangerous. Sir Basil won't simply retreat. He'll escalate. He already has." Julian pointed to the custody papers that had been delivered an hour ago. 8 o'clock hearing. Emergency placement. He's using speed and respectability as weapons. "Then we counter with exposure," Clara said, though her voice shook with exhaustion. "Take this to the magistrate. Show him what Basil really is. It's not that simple." Fenwick spread the legal documents across the desk. "Basil's filed under concern for the child. He's presented you as unstable, recently widowed, unable to provide proper care. He has witness statements from neighbors claiming they've heard arguments, seen you in distress." "Arguments with myself?" Clara's fury cut through her exhaustion. "I've been managing alone for months. Yes, I've been stressed. Yes, I've struggled. But I've never neglected Leo. I know that. You know that. But on paper, Basil looks like concerned family acting responsibly." Fenwick's expression was sympathetic but realistic. "And you look like a woman fleeing to a duke's house at midnight. The optics are unfortunate." Julian stood, pacing with controlled energy. "Then we change the battlefield. Basil wins if this stays a private family matter, whispered about but never fully examined. We need witnesses. Public scrutiny. Force him to defend his concern in daylight." "How?" Clara asked. "By making him deny the allegations publicly. In front of people he can't bribe." Julian turned to Fenwick. "Can you arrange a meeting with Magistrate Pembroke? The one who handles charity fraud cases?" Fenwick considered. "Pembroke is notoriously difficult. He hates aristocratic corruption, but he also hates wasting his time. We'd need compelling reason for him to investigate." "We have 15,000 reasons," Julian said flatly. "And a ledger with names, dates, and amounts. That's not suspicion. That's evidence." While they planned, Clara slipped away to check on Leo. She found him awake in the guest room, being quietly entertained by Greaves, who was teaching him how to properly fold a pocket square. "Mama." Leo ran to her, his brave facade cracking. "Are we safe?" "Yes, darling." Clara held him close. "The Duke is helping us. Is he really a monster?" "I think he pretends to be one so people don't realize he's actually quite kind." Leo absorbed this with the seriousness of childhood. "That's smart. Monsters don't have to be scared." The simple wisdom of it made Clara's throat tight. Her 8-year-old son had learned to value protection over perfection, safety over social nicety. She'd failed him in that. Failed to recognize danger soon enough. Failed to act before desperation forced midnight flights to gambling dens. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Julian entered, his expression gentler than she'd seen. "We need to discuss something difficult." "What?" "Basil's strategy will include using Leo as lever. Bringing him to the hearing. Forcing him to speak. Making him choose publicly between you and proper guardianship." Julian's voice was careful. "I want to avoid that. Keep Leo here, protected, while we handle this." "You want me to leave him again?" "I want him spared from being used as weapon." Julian knelt beside Leo. "Would that be acceptable to you? Staying here with Greaves and Mrs. Holloway while your mother and I handle some very boring adult business?" Leo looked between them, then addressed Julian directly. "Will you protect her?" "Yes." "Do you promise?" "Like last night?" "I promise." Julian's voice carried absolute certainty. "Nothing will hurt her while I'm present." "Then you can borrow my soldier." Leo held out the wooden toy. "For protection." Julian took the small figure carefully, as though it were made of glass. Something in his face shifted, became more human. "Thank you. I'll return it when I've brought your mother back safely." After Clara kissed Leo goodbye, she and Julian climbed into his carriage for the short ride to Magistrate Pembroke's chambers. She felt exhausted, terrified, and oddly bolstered by the man sitting across from her. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "The debt to Thomas doesn't require all this effort. You could have simply hidden us for a night and walked away." Julian was silent for a moment, watching London pass outside the window. "Do you know what it's like to live as a monster?" "No. It's safe. People fear you, which means they don't ask things of you. Don't expect warmth or connection. Don't get close enough to be disappointed when you fail them." His voice was flat, factual. "I've lived like that for 10 years. Built reputation on being cold, ruthless, untouchable. It's remarkably lonely. Then why maintain it? Because the alternative is feeling things. Caring about outcomes. Risking failure that matters." Julian turned to face her. "Last night, when you demanded I hide your son, you didn't ask me to be kind. You asked me to be effective. To decide and act without hesitation. You needed the monster. And now I'm remembering what it felt like to be human. To protect something that matters. To have someone look at me the way Leo did when I promised nothing would hurt you." Julian's expression was complicated. "Your late husband saved my life by reminding me that lives are worth saving. You're allowing me to repay that by remembering why I wanted my life saved at all." Before Clara could respond, the carriage stopped. They'd arrived at Pembroke's chambers. The magistrate's offices were austere, functional, designed to intimidate through severity rather than grandeur. Magistrate Pembroke himself was 60, grey-haired, with the face of someone who'd spent decades seeing humanity at its worst and somehow maintaining standards anyway. Duke of Alaric. Pembroke's greeting was respectful but not deferential. "Your solicitor said this concerned charity fraud." "I'm listening." Julian placed Thomas's ledger on the desk between them. "Sir Basil Harrowby has stolen £15,000 from orphan relief funds over 5 years. This ledger, compiled by his late clerk Thomas Hartwell, documents everything. Names, dates, amounts, falsified charities, ghost beneficiaries." Pembroke read in silence, his expression growing progressively grimmer. "This is serious. Where is Mr. Hartwell now?" "Dead," Clara said quietly. 3 months ago. Carriage accident. Very convenient timing. And you are his widow, Clara Hartwell. Sir Basil is currently attempting to gain custody of my son Leo through emergency petition. He claims concern for the boy's welfare. In reality, he wants to silence any potential witness to his fraud. Pembroke studied her with sharp attention. Why would an 8-year-old be a witness? Because my husband told me everything before he died. And because Leo represents the one person who could eventually testify about his father's fears, his work, his sudden death. As long as Leo remains free and aware, he's dangerous to Basil. That's a serious accusation, Mrs. Hartwell. I have a serious ledger, Magistrate Pembroke. Julian's voice was calm but firm. The question isn't whether Basil is guilty. The evidence is clear. The question is whether he'll be allowed to use custody laws to silence witnesses and destroy evidence. Pembroke sat back, thinking. The custody hearing is at 8 o'clock. Sir Basil will have legal representation, witnesses prepared, paperwork filed properly. Even with this ledger, I can't simply dismiss his petition without due process. We're not asking you to dismiss it, Mr. Fenwick interjected. We're asking you to attend, to observe, to ensure that if accusations of fraud are raised, they're addressed properly rather than buried under concerns about child welfare. You want me to turn a custody hearing into a fraud investigation. We want you to ensure justice isn't derailed by procedural convenience, Julian corrected. Pembroke studied them all, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded. I'll attend. But understand, if this ledger proves false or exaggerated, you'll face consequences. I won't be party to malicious prosecution. The ledger is accurate, Clara said with quiet certainty. My husband died compiling it. I won't let his death be for nothing. 4. The custody hearing took place in a formal chamber at the magistrate's court, smaller than Clara expected but more intimidating for its intimacy. Sir Basil arrived with his solicitor, Mr. Crick, and 3 witnesses, neighbours from Clara's previous lodging who looked nervous but determined. Basil himself was the picture of concerned family. Well-dressed but not ostentatious. Expression grave but compassionate. The perfect performance of a man bearing difficult responsibility. Clara sat beside Julian and Mr. Fenwick at the respondents' table, feeling the weight of every watching eye. Magistrate Pembroke had positioned himself to observe rather than preside, technically present as witness rather than judge, which allowed the regular custody magistrate to conduct proceedings while Pembroke watched for anything irregular. The hearing began with Basil's solicitor presenting his case. We're here out of concern for young Leo Hartwell's welfare. His father passed tragically 3 months ago. His mother, while undoubtedly loving, has shown signs of instability. Neighbours report hearing distressed sounds from her lodgings. She's been seen in questionable establishments. Most recently, she appeared at a gambling den after midnight, dragging her son through dangerous streets. The neighbours gave their statements. Yes, they'd heard crying from Clara's rooms. Yes, she'd seemed withdrawn, stressed. Yes, the boy had looked thin and tired. All of it was technically true and completely misleading. Clara had cried grieving her husband. Leo looked tired because they'd been surviving on limited funds while she managed Thomas's affairs. The gambling den visit was desperate protection, not reckless entertainment. Mrs. Hartwell? The magistrate's voice was neutral. Would you like to respond? Clara stood, her hands trembling but her voice steady. I've been grieving my husband while managing alone. Yes, I've been stressed. Yes, we've struggled financially. But I've never neglected Leo. I've protected him, fed him, loved him. And I fled to the Duke of Alaric because someone was coming to take my son, not through proper legal channels but through intimidation and force. That's a serious accusation, Basil's solicitor interjected. Can you provide evidence? Can Sir Basil provide evidence that his concern is genuine? Clara fired back. 3 months ago, he barely acknowledged Leo's existence. Now suddenly he's filing emergency custody? Why the change? Because I've become aware of the child's circumstances, Basil answered smoothly, performing perfectly. And I cannot in good conscience allow my nephew to suffer when proper care is available. Proper care like the orphan relief fund you manage? The words left Clara's mouth before she could stop them. The one my husband was investigating before he died. The room went silent. Basil's expression flickered, just slightly, before reassembling into wounded dignity. Mrs. Hartwell, grief has clearly affected your judgment. I understand you're looking for someone to blame for your husband's death, but making wild accusations. They're not wild. Julian stood, and the room's attention shifted immediately. They're documented. Mr. Fenwick, if you please. Fenwick produced Thomas's ledger, approaching the bench. Magistrate, this ledger was compiled by the late Thomas Hartwell in his capacity as clerk to Sir Basil Harrowby's charitable foundation. It documents systematic embezzlement of orphan relief funds totaling over £15,000. Basil shot to his feet. This is outrageous. My solicitor advised me this hearing would concern child welfare, not unfounded accusations of fraud. Then explain why you referenced documents you shouldn't have known existed, Julian interrupted, his voice cutting. Last night at the gambling den, you mentioned specifics about Mrs. Hartwell's situation that only someone who'd read sealed letters would know. You knew what Thomas left. You knew it threatened you. So you're attempting to gain control of Leo to silence any eventual witness. I knew nothing of the sort. This is conspiracy. Then explain these entries. Magistrate Pembroke had taken the ledger and was reading with grim attention. March 1893. St. Agnes Home for Girls. Allocation of £500 for building repairs. But St. Agnes burned down in 1891. How was money allocated to a building that didn't exist? Basil's solicitor was flipping through his own papers frantically. My client wasn't personally managing daily disbursements. If there were clerical errors. £15,000 worth of clerical errors? Pembroke's voice was ice. Over 5 years. All conveniently to places that either no longer exist or never existed at all. Mr. Crick, the clerk, had gone pale. His eyes darted toward the door as though calculating escape routes. Don't even consider it, Julian said quietly to Crick. Every exit is watched. It wasn't true, but Crick believed it. The man's shoulders slumped in defeat. The tipping point came when Basil, cornered and panicking, made his fatal mistake. He lunged toward Clara, grabbing her arm with enough force to bruise. You'll regret this. If I fall, I'll drag you and that boy down with me. You'll have nothing. Nothing. Before Julian could move, Greaves, who'd positioned himself near the chamber door, stepped forward with quiet authority. Sir, you will remove your hand from Mrs. Hartwell immediately. Behind him, 2 of Julian's footmen moved forward. Not threatening. Just present. Even Mrs. Holloway, Julian's cook, had somehow materialized, her rolling pin visible in her apron pocket. The absurdity of it might have been funny if Basil's face hadn't been twisted with genuine malice. But the household staff's united protection made something clear. Clara wasn't alone. Leo wasn't undefended. They had allies now. Basil released Clara's arm and stepped back, realizing his performance had crumbled completely. The concerned uncle was gone. Only the desperate criminal remained. Magistrate Pembroke stood. Sir Basil Harrowby, you will remain in custody while this ledger is investigated fully. Your petition for custody is denied. Mrs. Hartwell retains full guardianship of her son. This hearing is concluded. As officers escorted Basil and Mr. Crick from the chamber, Basil twisted back to snarl one final threat. If I fall, Clara, if I fall, Clara. Sir Basil twisted in the officer's grip, his polished mask finally gone. You'll fall with me. I'll see you ruined. I'll see that boy. Julian's voice cut through the chamber like a knife drawn without flourish. You will not finish that sentence. Basil sneered, desperate now. You can't protect them forever, Alaric. You think your title is a wall? It's a stage. They'll laugh at you for this. Julian stepped closer, no raised hand, no theatrics, just inevitability. Let them laugh. I have never confused noise for power. Magistrate Pembroke's gaze was hard enough to bruise. Remove him. As Basil was dragged toward the doors, he leaned back one last time, venomous and loud for the benefit of every ear in the room. She's nothing. She'll take what she can and leave you colder than before. The doors slammed. The silence that followed felt like air returning to a room that had been burning. Clara's knees threatened to buckle. Julian's hand found her elbow, steady, careful, as if he understood she'd been holding herself upright on anger alone. The presiding magistrate cleared his throat, now sweating under the weight of what had just spilled into public view. Mrs. Hartwell retains full guardianship. Sir Basil Harrowby's petition is denied pending investigation. This matter is concluded. Mr. Fenwick gathered the ledger as if it were a loaded pistol. We should leave before anyone decides to turn this into gossip. Outside, the morning was grey and busy and indifferent, London carrying on as though it hadn't nearly swallowed a child whole. Clara climbed into Julian's carriage with hands that still shook. I didn't win, she whispered once the door shut. I survived. Julian watched the street slide past. Survival is the first victory people like Basil never forgive. Back at the townhouse, Leo barreled into the hall the moment he heard Clara's footsteps. Mama. She dropped to her knees, crushing him to her chest, breathing him in like proof. He can't take you, she murmured into his hair. Not today. Leo pulled back just enough to look at Julian, solemn as a judge. Did you scare him? Julian's mouth almost smiled. Almost. The law did the scaring. I simply stood where Basil couldn't step. Leo nodded, satisfied, and marched off with Greaves, announcing he required victory biscuits, as if that were a recognized category. In the quiet that followed, Clara turned toward the front door, toward the part of her that still believed she must leave before gratitude became dependence. Julian spoke before she could move. Don't. Clara's throat tightened. Your Grace, this was one night. I agreed to one night of hiding, he said. Not one night of caring. He reached into his coat and drew out a simple ring, gold and showy, as if it had been waiting for the right hand rather than the right scandal. Basil will have allies. Men like him always do. He'll try again, through whispers, paperwork, threats dressed as concern. Clara stared at the ring, her breath caught. Julian's voice softened, but it didn't lose its certainty. Marry me, Clara Hartwell. Not because you're trapped, because I am finished pretending I have no heart. Let me make you and Leo untouchable. Let me make you mine, properly. He held the ring out, steady as a vow, and the Devil Duke waited, no bluff, no games, only an answer. If this story touched your heart, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing for more tales of mystery, courage, and love that defies expectations. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Would you have had the courage to come back from the dead to expose the truth? What would you do in Clara's place? Share your reflections in the comments below. Until next time, may you always choose truth over convenience, and love over fear. This is your storyteller reminding you that the most powerful stories are the ones where people refuse to stay dead when the world wants them buried.